Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon which part of the world you're joining in. I'm truly delighted to welcome all of you at this India at 100 dialogue on innovating towards a digitally inclusive India at 100, organized by the India at 75 Foundation. We have an extremely amazing and a diverse panel with us today, and I'm really privileged to be moderating this conversation. A little bit about India at 75 Foundation. It's a CII initiative, and India at 75 Foundation has been working towards envisioning a inclusively developed India at 100 through fostering dialogue and collaboration, and pave the way for an equitable future for all. Uh, as we kind of gather here today, we are not only celebrating our journey of India at 75, but we are also laying the foundation of the next 100 years. A future where we are talking about digital inclusivity, not just as an aspiration, but as a reality that touches the life of every Indian, right across every strata of the society. We are all driven by a common vision, a vision of India at 100 that is not economically robust, but also socially inclusive and equitable. Our discussions today will revolve around largely innovative strategies, best practices, and efforts that can pave the way for a digitally inclusive India at 100. We have got a extremely experienced panel with us for this conversation. I'm extremely happy to welcome Dr. Avik Sarkar. He is researcher and visiting faculty Data Technology and Public Policy, Indian School of Business. Uh, Dr. Lovelish Chanana, who's the Senior Vice President and Head of Government Affairs, Asia Pacific, Japan at SAP. Dr. Sarayu Natarajan, founder, Apti Institute, and co-director, Ecolab. Welcome, ma'am. Ms. Santha Subramani, Head Cybersecurity at Tata Consultancy Services Limited. Everyone, really look forward for a very fruitful conversation. All of you have a considerable experience in the digital space. Personally, what does a inclusive digital India at 100 mean to you, and why is it crucial for the country's future? A week you may like to begin with.
Yes, thanks, Suryadeep, and it's great that CII has organized the event, which focuses on the next 25 years, because we have seen the last 20 years, the last decade, a couple of decades of growth in digital, and this has been an enormous growth. We have seen starting with using digital just for nice to do communication, using Rediffmail and Yahoo from that time, and AOL for people with little bit of brown and white hairs will remember that. So starting from that to something today which is become a necessity, and we have digital penetrating in every domain. It's like communication, entertainment is definitely on the forefront, but we also have like health, education, finance, and many other sectors where we are adopting digital. I think even though we are adopting digital and in this three sectors, and also GovTech, government is also doing quite a bit on improving its functioning and governance through the use of digital. But the divide still remains. When I talk about, say, a person like us who are on the panel, we might be using digital for health tech. We might be using ed tech for our own education or for our children's education. We definitely must be using fintech to do our daily payments, online transactions. But when you see, there is a large part of India which is still not doing many of that. And the digital divide, when you look into the numbers, on one hand, you see the government will always like to project the numbers, because India in terms of numbers is huge, but often when you take in terms of percentages of the population, and when you even go on to groups and minorities and other groups, though there the numbers are dismally low. And even for GovTech, and I also work a lot on GovTech, and I just to tell the audience who are not aware of this term GovTech, because health tech and all you are all aware of, GovTech is basically a solution that the government is using for improving their services. So if I see there is a big divide on the GovTech side also, if you see around 30 states in India, 29, 30 states, around 3 or 4, Andhra, Telangana, Karnataka, on the leading edge of using GovTech for innovation, for growth on every aspect. But then if you see primarily the Northeast states or many other states, they are lagging behind. They possibly even not even taken the baby steps there. So the digital divide is not just on the people who are divided by education, like say, all of the panelists, when you read out Suryadeep, there were 3 doctors, and happy that I am one of them. But even when you go to the other part of the population who might be educated till class 4, or are they able to take full advantage of digital? Are they able to use digital for their productivity gains? I think these are challenges that we have to look into now, as we as professionals in this digital space are spearheading some of the initiatives. I think that is what is very, very important. So there are a lot that is there happening, looking into where where these initiatives are lacking, what government is doing, what the private society is doing. But I think I will stop here, and then we can take some of those things later. Thank you.
Lavnish, what does inclusive digital India at 100 mean to you?
No, thank you, Surya, and thank you, Avik, for the initial comments. I would like to structure it in 3 parts, Surya. So first, it's important to understand when we talk of a digitally inclusive country, what are we talking about? So that's very important. Second, where are we in India at this stage in terms of becoming digitally inclusive, as we are now taking this leaps forward on this digital journey? And third, what are some of the areas which will need strategic attention as we go forward to maintain this status and maintain this stature that we are actually acquiring? So from the concept perspective, I believe inclusion per se, all of us are aware, it refers to the equal access, equal participation, and equal benefit for all citizens, irrespective of background or abilities. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about inclusion. And when I'm talking about inclusion enabled by digital, with digital inclusion as one of the, I think we have a number of pillars that go into the digitally inclusive country. So first, obviously, is the digital access, the infrastructure part. That is ensuring that people have access. And if you see, we have done significantly well there in India. We have the fastest 5G rollout. Just 3 days back, the India Mobile Congress, it was announced that we will have 100% coverage to villages with 5G. Now that's the access part. The second part is the digital literacy part. So that's a second pillar, and people should be aware and be literate enough to actually use technology. Third, as Avik mentioned, the whole concept of electronic government supporting this whole journey is one important pillar. Fourth is the whole digital economy pillar. So I actually promote the investments in the digital field, whether it's a semiconductor that we are talking about or whatnot. The fifth is the language and cultural inclusion using digital. That to us, to a country like this, are as diverse as us, is the key. And sixth, ensuring that the underlying data privacy, data security, and all the concerns for a citizen level are taken about. So that to me is a larger construct of a digitally inclusive country as we talk about. And that's where now when we talk of India's digital inclusion journey, I think we should be proud, of few things. And in every conference, we repeat that we have done projects to scale that not many would have even thought about it as possible, whether it's 1.4 billion Aadhaars, the fastest 5G rollouts, the same day income tax returns, and whatnot, including the Jan Dhan account opening with 65% women. Numbers are there. And if you look at the next wave of digital, that's the digitally intelligent. Very, very sensibly, we have taken the approach of AI, artificial for all. That's the approach. And if you see the 7 expert groups that have submitted the recommendations on AI, fantastically broken into areas of compute, infrastructure, skilling, regulatory ecosystem, people, and the data governance. So there is a whole ecosystem approach that India has adopted in terms of taking it to the inclusion level. We have gone to villages with government services, the largest network of common service centers, in across the globe, with around 400,000 villages getting covered with the common services center. So there's a good ecosystem that we have covered. So we can be happy about where we have come in the digital inclusion journey, as I call it. Now the way forward, I think we have reached a platform where there's an opportunity now to build a leadership status for ourselves. The digital public infrastructure, as we call, has been a game changer. The DPI will scale further with ONDC coming in, the Open Network for Digital Commerce. It will supplement the UPI or the payment things that we have done, and we have done it so well by addressing the what's in it for me. I think the next wave will also include extending this whole journey to create opportunities for Indian citizens across the globe, through whether it will be through data diplomacy, whether it will be through localized models. Most important thing that we will do in India probably is to create new kinds of jobs, which and just to give you an example, when we talk of sustainability per se, as SAP, we did a study with BCG and World Economic Forum. We found out that 133 million new jobs are available only through the sustainability, and of that 57% will be in Asia. And I don't need to go into that. Out of these 57, majority will come from India. Now the new technology roles like the digital twin engineers, the data privacy specialist, I think we have a huge opportunity to actually make it horizontal. However, there is still a way to go. As Avik mentioned, the whole integration of government across siloed in terms of GovTech is also there. Second, this is the time when we now need to look at an integrated policy environment for all the technology. Currently, the policy environments are verticalized. We also need to look at it from a horizontal integration perspective and making the existing policies, example being, come what may, autonomous cars, we will not be able to avoid. In US, you can actually do autonomous cars. There'll be an impact on employability. There'll be an impact on safety. There'll be an impact on economics. We need to ensure the existing sectoral laws and sectoral policies are getting ready for technology, so that in the end, citizen gains, And final point is, we have an opportunity now to create the digital experience management for citizens. That's something that will become a differentiator, and that will add to the inclusion. So that to me is the journey where we have gone to. That to me is where we can take it forward. So that if we are able to actually follow the path that we are, very optimistic that we will be taking the path to leadership which others can follow.
Wonderfully put. Sarayu, I would like to have your response on this. For you, what does a digitally inclusive India 100 mean?
Thank you very much for that question. It's a hard act to follow Dr. Avik and Dr. Chanana. But I have a few thoughts. First of all, though, it's an absolute privilege to be a part of this conversation. And it's very delightful as somebody who's been a researcher thinking about technology, particularly questions of access, that the wider community is waking up to questions around inclusivity, and that it's a part of the initial framing rather than something that's tacked on at the very end. But just to jump into the vision or the view around Inclusive India, when we started APTI, which is a think tank that works at the intersection of technology and society, we did so with a firm belief in the role that technology could play in people's lives. We believe that it could increase access to markets, to the state, to services and products, and to each other. And also enable, for example, governments to be able to serve and reach their citizens better. But having said that, as we sort of dug into thinking about technology far more in detail, some of these questions around the digital divide or sort of the inequalities that surround the deployment of technology started to come about. And I'll sort of bucket it under two big concerns or two big thoughts to frame questions and thinking and inquiry into the question of an inclusive digital India. One is, of course, the question of access, which is, can people functionally access digital systems? And this includes access to the internet, access to instruments. And this is often in India's reality, and I think both the speakers before me did highlight that it's often mediated by social constraints, economic constraints, etc. So thinking quite deeply about how do we ensure that people have the functional access to digital systems, whether it's internet mediated or otherwise, that's a fundamental question we need to answer. The question, of course, that we need to continue to think about is that technology has strange ways in which the margins around it change. So you'd think that women experience some difficulties, they do. Communities that are marginalized experience difficulties, they do. But also there are whole new categories of marginalization that technology creates. People who are sort of distanced by geography, sometimes age, the elderly have significant difficulties in accessing using digital systems. I think all of us can recall or engaging with the older members of our families, trying to support them in sort of using digital systems. So it must be a reality for very many people around the room here. And also questions of language. So to continue to think that to think about inclusivity as a multifaceted, multi-pronged problem that rears its head in a constant way is one thing that we need to foreground and engage with very deeply when we think about an inclusive India in the future. What also needs to be thought of in the context of inclusive India is not just functional access, but once you do have the functional access, how do you sort of think about questions of trust, which is what enables individuals and communities to trust digital systems. And then, as Dr. Chanana mentioned, get to the question of equal benefit, equal value from digital systems. But that's access. That's once you get on, how do you benefit from it? But what we've also realized in our work is that harm falls or is distributed in an unequal way. So to think of inclusive India without thinking about the way in which harm occurs on digital systems, I think it might be a limited view. So what we need to do in thinking about an inclusive India, or at least what my vision of an inclusive India would look like, would be one that accounted for the patterns of harm as well, particularly difficulties in grievance redressal systems. So how do individuals and communities that are, that struggle with all kinds of systems, how do they navigate harm on digital systems? Because some of them are exceptional or some of them are novel. And these are sort of both two parameters that are very significant for me in an imagination of inclusive India. Now, India has already made significant headway, and I think Dr. Chanana outlined it quite significantly. But with Aadhaar and UPI, as well as the Open Network for Digital Commerce, but also OCEN, which enables credit. There are a variety of digital infrastructural systems that can inherently begin to start thinking about inclusive India, but the labor must continue. And so for us to realize the dream of a truly inclusive digital India, we must continue to chip away at these problems. I'll hand back to you, and hopefully we'll circle around to a couple of these themes later.
Thank you so
Over to
much.
you, Surya.
Thank you so much. Samantha, your comments on this, please.
Yes. So thank you once again, and Sarayu, Dr. Chanana, and Avik, all of you covered most of it. I would like to say, if we reimagine our worlds for 25 years hence, there are a few things that are going to be very different, right? The ubiquitous presence of AI, imagery, video, visual methods of communication, okay? That is going to be all pervasive, right? Second, the automation is going to transcend into every physical systems that we have, like you said, self-driven cars, all kinds of automation, driverless trains. Infrastructure may be governed by automated ecosystems, right? So there are a few things like that, which is the macro infrastructure, macro ecosystem impacting innovations that is going to be available more commonly than it is now. That is going to be the case. Now, in the present, despite the advances we have had in extending digital capabilities to citizens' processes, daily life needs, and all of that, there are still a lot of last mile glitches. Okay, one, the adoption and advantageous usage of digital infrastructure is directly correlated to the literacy rate of that particular community. If one is illiterate, they find it extremely difficult. There is a new population of digital middlemen right now, right? There are kiosks who help you file tax, who help you make reservations through IRCTC. So there is a digital middleman ecosystem. So at the end of it, despite having a digital ID and financial inclusivity, their actual rights are being controlled by a population of middlemen. How will that last mile weaknesses go away? That is one problem. Second, the access to these processes are absolutely governed through the availability of instrument. The image of a digital literate person is having a mobile phone and the knowledge to use it. I see people who cannot read use the mobile phone very effectively by using imagery. They store contact details as 2 roses, 1 bouquet. They can't read the names, but they are able to do that. Now, that is something we have to seriously think. We absolutely can't go with the assumption that the whole of India will speak the same language and the whole of India will be able to read English. Both are erroneous assumptions. So we have to account for the weaknesses of the society. Instead of assuming that the humankind will improve and become smart, we have to account for it using the technology innovations that are right now available, right? That is the second part. Third, the whole concept of awareness and protection. Just like we protect our hard assets, digital information is your own personal property, is a feeling that is not there right now. People give out, if you want to buy coffee, they ask for your phone number. Why? I want to send you your messages for your birthday. Why on earth? I don't want you to send me messages on my birthday. But people share. The fact that your Aadhaar card, UAN, tax, and your OTPs come to that number is not something people remember, right? So fact that your personal info, nobody can ask and you can refuse, and if they don't want to serve you coffee without a number, so be it, right? That is not there. You go everywhere, people ask those questions, right? So the idea that your digital info, your birthday, your Aadhaar card, your phone number, your address is yours and you please don't give it out is something that has to be told. Just like you close the gate of your house, just like you don't give out anything about your property. People understand as a hard asset. Digital asset is equally important. That awareness must have, and that is a hard thing to do. Lastly, what is the protection around these? If a car gets stolen, you go to a police station. What is the process to go to a cyber crime cell and get anything done? It's not there. There is no law enforcement for this universe that we are making it all pervasive. It is disproportionately small. If 60% of e-governance and of your processes are e-governance, your fund dispersal is e-governance, everything is e. then shouldn't your law enforcement also be e-enabled? Your 60% of your law enforcement should be able to cover digital frauds, digital crime, should monitor. That is a huge problem. There is no protection for a cyber citizen right now, zero. Okay, and that will become extremely important as the adoption grows and grows into those places who are less digitally aware, but the ease of use becomes so good that they will anyway use the infrastructure because of AI, imagery, moving away from literacy-led endpoints and all of that. Okay, now I believe areas that will really see transformation in this space in a positive way will be healthcare, because the reach and the ability of the capable physicians to remotely do a lot of things will improve and exponentially improves. The whole idea of village healthcare and their capability will be much, much better than right now. Education, but I believe it will be a two-paced transformation. There will be enormous changes in the digital infrastructure, but the last mile connectivity will lag behind, and there is a lot of innovation there. That's what I see 25 years from now.
Thank you so much. This was very, very interesting. Dr. Ravik, my next question is to you, and it's regarding the digital public infrastructure, pretty much. How can the development of public, digital public infrastructure like broadband, connectivity, and e-governance platform, how can they be kind of leveraged to ensure equitable access of technology across all segments of the society?
Yes, that's a very interesting question, Suryadeep. I think there are different countries which have taken different stance at providing services to their citizens. If you see, primarily when you talk about digital, it's the US where it all evolved. And even though US developed a lot of the initial technologies, it was up to the private firms to roll out those aspects. So I'm primarily talking of the email and the social media, the big names that you see around us, and we all use that for our day-to-day activities. Sharing anything on social media now, sharing anything on social media as a platform, should that platform be governed by the government, or should that platform be private? And even if it's private, should it be a foreign private or a domestic private? I think that is where I think a big challenge takes place, because as you see, there are countries who can change narratives in different ways. So there's a big geopolitical aspect there about who controls the narrative in your country. And this is just for the social media narrative. When you think about many other aspects, let's say we talk about the fintech and say that's the gateway through which. So we today have almost like it's a two-player market in India. One is Google Pay, other one is Phone Pay. I know this is a public forum and I'm taking the names, but I think it's a known fact to people. I think they both have about 40% market share, 35 to 40% of the market share. So one of them is an Indian entity, other one is a foreign entity. So again, when you go on to say EdTech, it is more of an Indian entity. When you go on to health tech, we do not have large scale there. So I think the challenge with the Indian government, I think each government takes stance in a very different manner. When you look into the big techs in America, the big techs in America are mostly Americans. When you look at mostly the ones who are leading on, say, the AI research in India, there are definitely the services companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, but we also see the names, the big techs of US or say China coming and playing a big role. I think that's the challenge that the government faces. Like, should we completely rely upon them, or we build something on our own that will provide us a framework and that will help us manage some of the things according to, and also maybe reach out to corners where maybe some of the entities might not have a very profitable aspect to go into certain corners, but we can do it because we are doing it as the social good. I think this is where I think the ecosystem at what brings in. Sorry, I instead of directly answering your question, I gave you a bit of a detour, because I think that is where a lot of the India's journey on DPI is going through. And it can give you enormous benefit, because we have seen the agri-tech, the fintech stack, the agri-stack, the fintech stack, giving a big benefit. The Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile, the Jam Trinity. Basically, the Jam Trinity is about like 8 to 10 years old, but now that has led to a fintech revolution. And once you build in these frameworks, it leads to many more innovations that we are talking about. The big innovation that is coming now, because again, this is something that was not of interest to many of the foreign players, but now we see that even the big MNCs like say Google and Microsoft going big into this. That's the Indian languages. We have seen a lot of focus, like even so, say packages for English, Chinese, Spanish, and many of the European languages have been available for the last 20 years in natural language processing. But you saw Indian languages, there was not a large digital population, but with the government initiatives towards Bhashini, which is the big initiatives, and I think both Saryu and Lavnish mentioned about this digital divide. We have out of the 1.4 billion, only about 200 million who speak English. So if you have to reach out to the rest 1.2 billion, then we have to go to other languages. We have to go to from just text to voice services, and for that we need huge infrastructure. We cannot expect the companies who are developing, say, a health tech app or an ed tech app or a fintech app to even develop the language technology. So I think this DPI, if it comes for languages, it will be a huge benefit. But it's not just limited to language, because there's a range of things. And I also want the other speakers to maybe pick up on some of the other ones, and I will leave it there, because it also the huge opportunity in the global south. That is what India is positioning himself. We have developed Aadhaar for ourselves, and Lavnish talked about the 1.4 billion who are on Aadhaar, but it's also another 1 billion who are not using Aadhaar, but they're using an open source stack, which is similar to Aadhaar. And there are about 5 countries, Sierra Leone, Sri Lanka, and many and few others, which I don't remember the name, who are using MOSIP, which is the open source platform that has come out of India. And they are using that. So it's not just this 1.4 billion who is benefiting, but another 1 billion outside India who have been benefited from there. And it is not just this platform. Once the platform goes, there are enormous opportunities for our tech companies to go and do customization there, for our people to go and work there. So it just opens up a plethora of opportunities once these platforms become more popular. And I think DPI will be one of the strong agenda for India, both in global diplomacy, its own growth, and also the growth of the global south.
Great.
I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. We are also kind of, I'm happy to share that we also now have Pawan Duggal joining this kind of dialogue. Pawan, welcome to the whole kind of dialogue.
Thank you.
We kind of just began with our conversation, and we are extremely pleased to have you. Just for the benefit of everybody, Pawan is an advocate with the Supreme Court of India and chairman of International Commission of Cybersecurity Law. Pawan, we are just kind of going through some set of questions to all the panelists. I'm just going to come back to you while you kind of settle down. Lavnish, my next question is to you. And it is pretty much around the whole kind of synergy between industry and government. You have significant experience in the government affairs. By your experience, can you shed some experience in terms of how the collaboration between industry and government can be optimized to enhance the whole digital transformation, and also the whole context of cybersecurity measures from an India standpoint? What can both government and industry do to extend the benefits to the larger population?
Great. Thank you. As I said earlier, the path to the inclusion that we are talking about obviously cannot be handled through a single stakeholder effort. It has to be a multi-stakeholder engagement and government industry partnership would be the key, whether structured through the traditional PPP model or pro bonos or otherwise through the model can be anything. Now, both government and industry have, while they have their own siloed objectives and siloed goals, I think there is an interface, or there is an integration that now exists, particularly when we are moving from this so-called digital India to digitally intelligent India. That is with the emergence of AI and the rapid shift in technology industry from, and that's where there is an opportunity that is opening out now. Where can the collaboration happen? Some of the areas, right? People and workforce and skilling capacity building is one area where we see huge potential for collaboration through a win-win scenario. The reason is obvious. More digitally included citizens, more digitally literate users, more digitally literate consumers. It's easier for the business transformation and the industry transformation. It is also easier for the government to meet the employability objectives that we are talking about. And come what may, the tech advancement has always seen a talent shortage, come what may. Always. It's not the case now. So that's one area. The second area that is a big potential for collaboration is this whole replication of global best practices in India that probably industry and government can put together. I'll give you an example. Example is India has 63 million SMEs, and any amount of employment generation, any amount of grassroots level digital transformation is incomplete without the mention of SMEs. So, how do we go about SME digital transformation to result in? Now, look at us. We actually partnered in countries like Japan, wherein Japan created a city of Aizu, created a platform wherein SMEs can come latch on to solutions provided by people like us, implemented by the likes of implementation partners like TCS or others, and they can actually. So there is a platform that gets developed now. This platform, I see a huge replication. The creation of community of Indian SMEs through Global Bharat that we created here is another example based on the replication. That's second. Third, obviously, is the area of funded research and research and development and innovation. And that's where we see whether it's quantum, whether it's other areas, whether it's the even the basic things like supporting the Atal tinkering mission, Atal tinkering labs through the Atal innovation mission of the government of India, wherein we saw so many industries coming in, going to the schools and adopting these labs to ensure that the school children actually get the exposure to 3D. School children actually get the exposure to robotics. That's the third area. And fourth area that we see increasingly coming up now in India is the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem support that we are getting it. Once there is a support, industry is quick to latch on to create either commercial or social enterprises which will actually help. So the way is moving, we are moving is significantly, and this collaboration is increasing by the day. What will be very interesting is to see with the age of AI, how does this translation and how does this collaboration get reshaped as we move forward? Because AI per se will not be a one-way revolution. It's a two-way revolution. You give me the data and I give you the solution. That's the big challenge. Now, coming to your point on the security, privacy, and this thing, I think we have spoken enough on security as a vertical. I think first thing that we need to do going forward is to make cybersecurity as a horizontal. Let's be very, very clear. There is no way you can talk about cybersecurity as a vertical anymore, with leaving it to specialized folks who will handle that. That's one. Second, the when we talk of artificial intelligence and the emerging paradigm, we talk of both things: AI for cybersecurity and cybersecurity for AI. We talk about both things. And when I talk about cybersecurity for AI, we are talking about the challenges of liabilities, for safety, ethics, bias, and whatnot that needs to be governed. At the same time, probably going forward, I think we need to differentiate, Suryadeep, as we move forward between development of technology and deployment of technology, and start to within business and consumer. Example: when I'm doing a healthcare, implementation of an artificial intelligence, I have a personal data to protect, I have an ethics, I have a safety to protect. But when I'm creating a job description in a business system, the only thing that probably impacts me is if it is unbiased. If there is no bias in terms of creation of a job description. So lower hanging fruits in terms of deployment and development and business and consumer, if we need to capture this whole journey of cybersecurity and application potential, can easily be traced to success. That's my thought process.
Wonderful. So while we are on the subject of cybersecurity and data breaches, Pawan, I wanted to have your perspective on this. A lot of these breaches actually have a disproportionate amount of impact on the underprivileged section of the society. How can cybersecurity efforts be kind of tailored and customized to ensure that the most vulnerable in the society, the kind of lowermost strata, uh, they are protected and their kind of interests are safeguarded?
Thank you. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. I think today when I look at cybersecurity, I want to look at it from the perspective of bigger societal public good. Till now, cybersecurity is only being seen as a technical issue. The normal mindset being that cybersecurity is a governmental responsibility. I can do any mess, anything on my device, but my expectation is that it will be the government which will be going ahead and taking care of cybersecurity. Also, we have to understand that historically speaking, we are at a very unique kind of a position. Today, when I talk with you, India doesn't have a dedicated law on cybersecurity. The Indian Information Technology Act 2000 is thoroughly inadequate to deal with cybersecurity, though it has some provisions pertaining to cybersecurity that we introduced post the Mumbai attacks in 2008. The government of India came up with the National Cybersecurity Policy in 2013, which is a great policy document at that point of time. But then we allowed the said policy document to remain a mere paper tiger. And consequently, we never were successful in implementing the same. And today, we are already talking for the last couple of years about the government coming up with a new national cybersecurity strategy, which is still not yet being released. Now, in this kind of a context, I find that the Indian approach to cybersecurity leaves much to be desired, more so to be seen in the context of using cybersecurity for digital empowerment. Today, India is the biggest population, the most populous nation in the world, with 140 crore Indian users and more than 60% of them already online. We right now have a very propelling kind of an ecosystem where India is fast moving towards a much and constantly widened digital gap with each passing day. There are going to be more digital haves than more digital have-nots than digital haves. So in a scenario like this, if we can actually start using cybersecurity and its legislative approach as a means for protecting the vulnerable people, the digital have-nots in the country, that will be a great starting point. But for that, we require appropriate sensitization. Today, the sensitization is missing. There's a need for more capacity building amongst all users. The government does some capacity building, but I think the time has come where we have to start using these mass media communication methodologies and platforms for the purposes of disseminating more information. And I think we can just begin with the mobile, because today, invariably, every Indian has some mobile or the other in his own hands. So if we can link up mobile and then join it with the broader issue of cybersecurity, that could be a good starting point. But again, merely doing lip service will not suffice. It's very important that we must also provide effective remedies to persons who become victims of cybersecurity breaches. 28th of June 2022, the Government of India implemented the Information Technology Directions 2022, which now mandate every person in India, apart from every corporate or company, to mandatorily report every cybersecurity breach, cyber incident, or cybersecurity incident that comes to their attention within 6 hours of coming to know about it. You don't do that within 6 hours, and you actually commit an offense under Section 70B of the Information Technology Act 2000, punishable with imprisonment and fine. So much that this particular directions are in place for the last more than 16 odd months, but the fact still remains is that most of the people are still not complying. They are still not reporting. So it will ultimately have to boil down to a couple of very serious parameters if we want to digitally empower the digital have-nots and the more vulnerable sections of the Indian society. Number one, have a strong, dedicated cybersecurity legal framework, because the existing frameworks are not adequate. Number two, quickly come up with the national cybersecurity strategy so that the various stakeholders in the digital ecosystem know fully well what are their rights, duties, and responsibilities when they are dealing in the cyber secure ecosystem. Number three, we need to do more capacity building. And I run a couple of courses, and one of my most popular courses on Udemy is a course called Cybersecurity Law. And this course, along with other courses, have already been done by more than about 29,500 professionals from 174 countries, speaking 52 national languages. These figures are telling us that there's a massive need that's crying to be met. And the need is more capacity building. And I think the quicker we start doing that, and I think it's even better if we can actually start mandating that generating more awareness about cybersecurity needs to be a mandatory compliant provision for companies to comply with the CSR, or the corporate social responsibility segmentation. Because if you can actually mandate whether you do anything in CSR or not, but do something to enhance capacity building on cybersecurity, that can be a great step forward. And ultimately, we also require some kind of a deterrent mechanism, some kind of effective remedies for affected persons. Right now, the government has given us two options. We can either go and report any cybersecurity breach or cybercrime to the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal at cybercrime.gov.in. And a lot of people have started using it. And the second option that the government has provided is the National Cybercrime Helpline number, 1930, where you can go ahead and report online or on the phone any kind of a cybersecurity breach or cyber incident. But the humongous numbers of the Indian population are actually mandating we need to do far more in terms of capacity building. And that could be a good starting point as we move forward. Thanks.
Great. Yep. Santa, you spoke about, in the first question, you spoke about inclusive digital growth should encompass all sectors, and you mentioned healthcare being a great opportunity. How do we protect the critical infrastructure and data in these sectors? And I'm talking about a little broader spectrum from agriculture, healthcare, education, etc. So how do we protect critical infra data in these sectors from cyber threats? And what are some of the digital technologies and innovations that can be formulated to ensure a secure and a safe digital ecosystem?
So that's that is a concern of every business, every government in the last 5 years at least, because it is I would say, the third front of war, right? The first to be your borders and your essential resources. This third front. Every sector has its unique, what we call threat surface. What are the exposures they have? If you look at a highly interactive a B2C kind of a business, utilities, telephone, where there is a essential infrastructure and there is a distribution ecosystem, the channels. The architecture and the technologies required for this differ. There is investment required. There are fundamentals to be covered and a continuous management of weaknesses that we call vulnerabilities to be handled. Now, what's happened in these kind of ecosystems is that the modernization requirements of keeping up with the demands of the customers, demands of the business, have far outpaced the way in which the cyber protection is applied to those. Okay, there are new systems being formed, but the protective part of testing, SaaS, DaaS, pen testing, malware management, the entire prerequisite of branding a process that they are giving out to their customers as, I am certifying that this is a completely cyber protected process that I'm rolling out to you, Mr. Customer, is not there. Everybody is playing catch up. There are no standard methods of obligating a companies that, you are in this business. How do you say you're secure? Those questions are asked by auditors. Those questions are asked in the event of an attack. It is not a regular output a company is obligated to give unless they are in the financial services where SEBI has mandated a few things by way of cyber assurance from these companies. There are two problems here. It is very expensive to protect everything. What is acceptable risk, right, for these, especially like economies like ours, where there are a lot of startups, there are really jugaad-based enterprises doing very well. Their competitiveness will go away if their overhead on securing their business is way more than what they earn in a year, right? So what is acceptable risk? How they can spend just enough to get through their daily business and keep just a little bit ahead of the last attack method. These are the problems that we are trying to solve now. It is not to protect everything and build more and more walls. We have realized it is just not possible. Item number one. Item number two, regulations are a great way of forcing some of those cash-rich enterprises to do enough to protect their businesses and their customers. Lot of regulations around how insurance needs to manage their data, how healthcare companies need to manage and protect their data. That is being used by Australia, like Essential 8, or in Europe, are yet to come into play in India. That will be a great way to make cash-rich corporates to enable a knowledge framework that they adopt and then can be used by other less fortunate enterprises, so to say, not so big enterprises. That is item number two. Item number three is that while doing so, there is also a need to be very agile in responding to a crisis. What has now come to bear is that the fact that one will have a breach is kind of a given. Something will happen, something will go wrong. There are just far too many tactics and far too many technologies and far too many franchisees working together to crack an enterprise. So it's way too powerful. The agility of an enterprise to catch it and respond quickly is what is to be tested now. If everything in India goes down, the entire telecom network goes down, what happens? At a nation level, the responsiveness, the crisis management ability needs to be tried and tested. Recently, there was an exercise, but this has to be done at an enterprise level and has to be planned. Frequent exercises has to be done at a nation level. Railways ecosystems go down and telco ecosystems go down. What happens? These kind of scenario-based testing of how a national infrastructure will respond need to be done. So this will expose those critical areas, what I would call attack path, to be covered. Once the attack path is covered, one is not really obligated to protect every little item, right? There is an acceptable risk approach that one can take, which is cost effective and does not pressurize the enterprises to spend all and on a scare mode all the time. See, the cybersecurity professionals who help these enterprises also don't want to be seen as a detrimental force to the business advancement, right? They want to be seen as enablers. And they are constantly innovating on how this will happen. Now, 25 years hence, I believe the compute power given by quantum computing is going to be a huge thing. Second, the intelligence provided by AI ecosystems will be a huge thing. Combine quantum with AI and got a deadly power of intelligent computing at scale. How every business is going to protect themselves? Do we have quantum protected infrastructure to be set up for critical data? What does that design look like? These are big at scale technology problems that requires money, that requires a lot of intelligent people coming together and figuring it out, and talk a lot of technology expertise. I think that's the challenge for India as a whole. We are a huge country. We are expanding because of our ability to build hard infrastructure, be it aviation, be it railroads, be it telco, be it at distance education, distance healthcare. These challenges will be crippling if it's not invested. And some of these investments need to come from big businesses who are doing this critical infra and also from the government. I think that's where we are at. Indigenous protect technologies will be a big thing. Encouragements for indigenous protection and cybersecurity technologies to be evolving will be very helpful, because that will cover one aspect of our weakness, is the dependence on foreign technologies for our own protection. That is very disconcerting, actually, if you look at some of these defense sectors and all that. So it is imperative we more and more focusing on developing world-class protection technologies in India. Not, I also have a startup in cybersecurity kind of an approach. That cannot be the case, right? Because we have world-class critical infrastructure. Our protection also needs to be world-class. So I think these are some of the challenges I foresee, at least. Yeah.
Great. Sarayu, my next question is to you. While we have actually made a lot of progress digitally, technologically as a nation, the growing kind of digital device, and you actually touched upon that in your initial comments as well, is a big concern. Now, how can digital innovation can be tailored to bridge the whole kind of digital divide? I'm talking about urban, rural, I'm talking about socioeconomic gaps. And how do we ensure that the most remote and the marginalized communities within the country, they have equitable access to digital channels, platforms, and technologies?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a tough one. And I think even before jumping into what kind of specific approaches might be worthwhile, it's worth considering that this should be a live problem. In that, we should keep coming back to the question of inclusivity and access all the time, because what technology does is digital technologies, particularly at the last mile, tend to create newer and newer patterns of people who are struggling or people who are excluded, and different patterns of harm. So it's a live question, and we shouldn't see this as a goalpost or something that we'll achieve and then check the box and move forward, but rather as one that we keep coming back to and keep alive through time. I think there is quite a lot that is generally said about design and the way in which technological interfaces, particularly, and I largely focus my thoughts on the last mile or consumer-facing digital systems. And a lot of emphasis is often laid on the design, which is how does the interface look? How does the system interact with the user? How does it render on different devices, etc.? Which, to my mind, are very, very significant questions. And within that lie deeper questions, such as, for example, debates about some people are not even familiar with the concept of a shopping cart, which is often very intuitive to very many people, perhaps in this room. So thinking through conceptions, thinking through sort of ideas like that is very important. But I think the focusing, or in the social sciences world, it's called fetishizing, when you focus too much on design at the expense of other questions which cause lack of inclusivity. I think we might end up making a mistake. In fact, research shows quite significantly that awareness and being able to, for example, for some communities to even get out of their house into a place where they can access a system is a challenge. So thinking of design not just at that interface or in the process of that transaction, but rather as a complete process which originates from the point of time that the person leaves home in certain instances to the point of or from the starting point to the decision to engage with a certain technology. And so being cognizant that very many barriers operate across the value chain is critical. I think there's another sort of way to think about the question of design for inclusivity. And I think it was touched upon earlier in this panel as well, which is that a lot of our research and research all around the world, it's not something that's very novel that we've done, shows that technology uses intermediating, which is that there are, middlemen, agents, call them what you will. There are a variety of characterizations of these individuals that help others to reach technology. In fact, it's often family members who mediate for others, particularly elders within households. These intermediaries are critical. They have been around for ages, whether it is in mediating access to the state or mediating access to digital technologies. So one conception is to think of them as solely a problem, and I will admit that in certain instances they are definitely rent-seeking agents that intermediate, often to the detriment of the individuals or the communities that are seeking access. But in very many instances, they actually enable greater, more meaningful, more fulfilling access. And to treat them as, or rather acknowledge them in the design of systems can be a critical way in enhancing inclusivity. And we've discovered that in the context of government systems. Public governance systems where you can file a complaint via an app about, let's say, garbage in your neighborhood. We went out to communities, we did this research in 3 states, and we found that in all of these 3 contexts, citizens actually prefer leaning on somebody rather than going directly themselves. And this is for a variety of reasons. For some of the wealthier ones, it's what is known as shoe leather costs, which is it's cheaper to go to somebody else rather than try and figure out a complicated app yourself. In other instances, it is a fear of being rejected by the state or being afraid, etc. That's not to say that these are universally applicable laws, but to walk away from acknowledging the role of these intermediaries, and very often very significant positive role that they play, might be a limited view. So in my vision of what might be ways to think about designing for an inclusive India, I would think that thinking of design as a holistic process, which doesn't necessarily just stop at the interface, and B, thinking about who actually mediates access in various instances are both very useful. And we've found in our research in various instances that these have played a useful role. Back to you, Surya.
Thank you so much. So I'm actually a little mindful of the time as well. We can actually stretch this by another 10 minutes or so. And my last question to each one of you would be, and if you guys can just do a 2-3 minute kind of a quick wrap-up, what would be some of the action points and recommendations that you would have for the government, industry, and civil society to kind of shape a country that is digitally inclusive and forward-looking? Avik, to begin with you, a quick 3-minute.
I get the first chance every time because of the A in my name, possibly. So thanks. I'll just sort of continue with what Saryu ended, so that the viewers have a continuity, and extend upon you talked about innovation. And if you have to make an inclusive society in the next 25 years, innovation is the key. And I think one aspect of that we talk about innovation is that when we think about innovation in our mind, we only think about technology. And I think that is where I think the challenge that comes. We feel that only technology can solve the innovation problem. There are 2 or 3 other groups that we leave out. The actual citizens, what are their views? Social scientists like Saryu, groups like them, how they bring in the social aspect, and the whole thing, whether government will do it, whether private party will do it, brings in the business aspects, where you need to bring in that Is there money to do something of this nature? And I'm sure everyone will agree that some of these inclusions have not taken place because there is no money there. And that's a hard fact, even though it might not sound very sweet to everyone. But that's the bitter reality. Where there is no revenue to be generated, companies don't want to go there. They don't want to build roads there. They don't want to build ecosystem there. They don't want to build license there. And that's the hard part. So I think we have to come up with business models and see where is it helping. And Lavnish took this nice example of the MSMEs. MSMEs are like there. We have lakhs of MSMEs in India, and we have very good systems for the big techs and the large companies, all sort of digital enterprise solutions. Can we make these enterprise solutions available and understandable to these MSMEs that will help them do their business? I think if that can be cracked, that's just one example. If I take an example of a young youth who is maybe in the early 20s and maybe has done only say class 4 to class 8 level of education and doing some sort of small stuff helping people around in the locality, can digital help this person? And we have to innovate from that perspective and see what the social science can help, what the business can help, and what the government can help. And this collaboration, the question that you posed to Lavnish again, I think what is very crucial. I think these groups has to collaborate. And I think that also has been one of the challenges of India. Whenever we talked about innovation, we only thought about the IITs can do it. We left out the other institutes, the legal aspect, the regulations. We have an advocate in the room. How does the regulation play a role in coming up with innovation? I think these are aspects that we don't talk about much. I think we have to bring different groups together, and such interdisciplinary approaches will help us bridge this gap.
Sure. Lavnish, your reactions, your recommendations on...
Thank you. I would put, broadly 3 areas of recommendation. First is around people. I think we need to communicate, and sensitize, and sensitize. There has to be a huge awareness, impetus now that has to come on sensitization of technology, and that would definitely lead to a back end pull of the use and adoption for inclusion. That's one. Obviously, I'm not undermining the advantage of taking our demographic advantage and all, right? That's one. Second, high time that we even only on the people front, we have a relook at our education system in terms of making it more tech ready and more digitally ready, including putting things which are more innovation centric for students. I think that linkage between the backend integration between industry, the time is now, or it will be never. That's second. Third area that probably I would definitely feel that we have a way to go is this whole area of focusing on, at least from a policy perspective, on standards and interoperability. We have done all these innovations which don't talk to each other. Our geographic complexity, our geographic diversity somehow leaves it much to be desired in terms of bringing the whole holistic and cohesive impact. And that interoperability and standardization is the key that we would be looking at. I can have an outside-in approach, or I can have an inside-out approach. That doesn't matter, but we must focus. And fourth, from a business perspective in India, if I can focus on SMEs, rest assured the ecosystem around that would lead to the inclusion that we are talking about. And it's a focus area for industry. It's a focus area for government. It's a focus area for everybody. The biggest employer, the vibrant sector, the growth, everything is there. If these 4 areas we can actually use to trace our path, I think we will be in good shape. If not in the best going forward.
Perfect. Santa, you would like to add your comments around this?
Yeah, I would like to be, whereas there are large initiatives and most of the aspects have already been addressed by the eminent panelists here, I was thinking something very simple. When India was young, Catch 'em young was also important. We went after our school children and our education systems, right? To enforce or to permeate a feeling of nationalism, permeate a feeling of whatever is the theme that India wanted to inculcate in our youth, right? First aid, things like that. I believe every school, especially government schools and colleges, mandatorily should have a cyber awareness, cyber education thing. It is very easy. NCC is there. Bharat Scouts and Guides are there. They are taught to tie ropes and things like that. This also should be an essential part of one being an Indian citizen. I believe that is a level of intrusive awareness program we need to start right from primary schools. What is encryption? Who can ask you your home address and why should you give it? Things like that. How will you help the next guy not fall victim to a cyber fraud? I think that is a big thing. And it's very simple, easily implemented. We have NCRT. We have a very good last mile channel of education system empowerment, right? I think that will be a very simple thing to deploy. I think that is one of the suggestions I have.
Thank you so much, Sarayu. What are your thoughts on some of the actions, recommendations you would like to propose?
Not much and merely additive. I agree with what Shanta just said, which is having I would call it a digital rights education curriculum that goes across, particularly starts in school, is a very critical thing to do. I also think that adults need education. And I think Mr. Pawan mentioned it, but I think this is something that in terms of thinking about how adults engage with digital systems, building up capacities to, understand how do you share your password or do you not share your password, OTPs, etc. All of those things are important learnings to have. I have a minor sort of addition to that, or a build on to that, which is that in our work, and I see this in very many discussions and panels, there seem to be two big communities: the technical community and the social science, policy, legal worlds. And very often they do not intersect. And these are, not younger people; they're all adults, very much in the depths of their professional worlds. I think that there is a strong case as technologies get more complicated. For there to be mutual adult education. I think there are very many principles around navigating one's rights in the context of technology that are already embedded in the law. But how do you, as how does the technical community, for example, engage with, understand, embed some of those practices in the code itself? So that's one part. And the other, which is what are the ways in which technology operates or can affect or intersect with rights? I think these two communities need ways. One is a mutual adult education process, but I also think continued fora where the communities talk to each other. I think the second, and it's a far more minor point, is that we think, and it's been mentioned as well, I think governance is something we need to start talking about. And different kinds of systems need different approaches with respect to governance because of the ways in which they are deployed and operate on the ground. So keeping on thinking about questions of governance is also relevant. Back to you, Surya.
Awesome. Pawan, I wanted to seek your views and also kind of treat this as a closing kind of a remark from the panel. What would be some of the actions and recommendations that you would have for the government and industry to kind of accelerate and expedite this journey?
I believe we have a long way to go, but we can definitely put up certain milestones to achieve as we go forward, both as the government and also as the industry. Let me first begin from the governmental angle. I think the government has a lot of work to do in terms of having in place appropriate enabling legal frameworks which can help support this entire concept of digitally inclusive India. Number two, we need some specific action under certain specific trust areas. So I've already highlighted the need for having a dedicated law on cybersecurity. The second important thing will be that the government must start implementing the provisions of the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023 in right earnestness. Why? Because it's for the first time you have now provided for fines up to 250 crore rupees in case of organizations or individuals do not comply with protection of personal data. Third thing, government needs to specifically now come up with legal frameworks for protecting digital privacy. Because if you want digitally inclusive society in India to be fully up in place, you will have to go ahead and protect privacy. We already have been granted the fundamental right to privacy as a part of the fundamental right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution of India by the Supreme Court in the case of Justice Puttaswamy versus Union of India. But we need to do far more. We need to come up with legal frameworks in this regard. And finally, I think India is already coming up with a Digital India Act. They are in the process of conceptualizing the same, and that could really lay down the foundations for a strong digitally inclusive society. In addition, the government also has the proposition that it can come up with secondary legislation under Section 87 of the Information Technology Act 2000 to mandate all companies as intermediaries to specifically take steps to make the cyber ecosystem more secure, to contribute mandatorily through CSR route for the purposes of strengthening the cause of the digitally inclusive society, and finally also to create more awareness. That's what are the milestones I expect from the government as we move forward in this direction. From the corporate sector, there's already a lot of expectation. Corporate sector suddenly is reeling under a lot of pressure with new legislations like the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, and of course now your non-reporting of cybersecurity breaches leading to criminal liability for the top management of the companies under the IT Directions 2022. But I think if you really want to have a more futuristic, robust, sound, secure, reliable, and resilient digital society in India, corporate sector has to play a very important role. The reason is that corporate India today is having a big chunk of Indian critical information infrastructure, and corporate India also needs to lay its foundations in terms of voluntarily adopting international best practices so as to pave the way for a more inclusive digital society. We have to start contributing more. So it's not the question of what I expect from the nation. It's a question of what I as a corporate can give back to the nation, which will have to be the guiding mantra for the corporate India as it goes forward. Yes, there will be laws, there'll be now new exposures, but all said and done, these are all baby steps that we are taking towards making sure that those deprived and vulnerable sections of the Indian society who still are not yet part of the digital revolution can all be made digitally inclusive. And finally, corporates have a huge responsibility to go ahead and sensitize all digital stakeholders that they should not participate in this ongoing huge revolution that India is seeing, which I call it is the Great Indian Vomiting Revolution. Indians are vomiting data about their personal, professional, social lives on the internet. And the time has come that both government and the corporate sector have to inform, warn, and sensitize users not to vomit their data before it becomes too late. Because if we are continuing to keep on vomiting data on a continuing basis on the digital ecosystem, maybe this dream of a digital inclusive India may be a long, elusive one in the ways and the times to come. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much, Pawan. And, I think we are now kind of out of time. And I realize we have been kind of talking about for the last 80 minutes on this topic. All of us are extremely passionate. And we have just kind of scratched the surface. The whole subject is so deep, we can kind of keep on talking for another, for a long, long time and discuss so many nuances of this. So I before kind of wrap it up, I would really like to thank the entire panel here. Thank you so much, Avik, Lavneesh, Santha, Pawan, and Sarayu, for your time. Thank you for everybody for joining. And especially, I would like to thank the India at 75 team at CII. Thank you so much, Vaishali, Amarpreet, and the entire organizing team for setting this up. This is an extremely important topic. And I'm sure some of the conversations that we have had here would have helped educate the audience and also would have helped them ponder a little bit more in terms of how we can really contribute to build this nation stronger and more kind of forward looking. Thank you so much. With that, I would really like to wrap up the event. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.